All right, all right, all right. Hey ho, let's go. This is Christopher, and I'm so glad you could join me for another edition of Legends and Losers. We have a fantastic show for you, and our co-host Colin is in Kuala Lumpur today on assignment. But today we continue in our tradition of hacking some of the greatest minds in entrepreneurship, venture capital, and all of Silicon Valley and the greater Bay Area. Our guest today on Legends and Losers is none other than legendary venture capitalist and the co-founder of Bullpen Capital, Paul Martino. But before we get to Paul, first and foremost, I really want to thank you. As I think we shared on a previous episode, our success at Legends and Losers continues to build. Our audience is growing by approximately double every 2 weeks. It's actually a little bit more than that. And so I really want to thank you for all of what you're doing to make that happen. Sharing our show with your friends, writing reviews for us and subscribing. Subscriptions and reviews send podcasts to Nirvana land. So I want you to know how touched we are by not just the numbers, but the things that you have to say, whether it's in your reviews or on our Facebook group or so forth. So thank you so much. And before we get to Paul, we also want to share with you a Legends and Losers public service announcement. As you know, the folks at Samsung are the category king in building mobile devices that actually explode and could kill you. However, it turns out iPhone users have to be cautious as well. On March 22nd of 2017, Wiley Day fell asleep with his iPhone very close to him. And it turned out his iPhone was charging. He had his iPhone in bed, and it was charging overnight via extension cord. The 32-year-old Huntsville, Alabama man would soon regret that habit. I guess this is something he did on a regular basis. And by the way, this is from the Washington Post. I am not making this up. The next day, Day woke up and rolled over, and as he did so, he found out that a dog necklace he was wearing happened to catch on the exposed prongs of the charger head, and which had come loose from the extension cord. And that metal chain suddenly became a conductor for the electricity, and it traveled straight to Day's neck. The jolt he felt was, quote, the eeriest, darkest, and most demonic thing you could ever experience, he told the Washington Post. I don't have enough adjectives to describe it. He said he was thrown from his bed to the ground by the electric charge. As a matter of fact, for moments he stopped feeling anything. Quote, your body is numb at that point. He said, I guess people would think it would be burning, but in my case, it felt like pressure around my neck. Anyway, he had to go to the hospital, and it was, shall we say, an electrifying experience. So do not sleep with your iPhone and your iPhone charger in bed. All right, Paul Martino. Paul founded 4 companies before he started Bullpen Capital, including Tribe Network, one of the very first social networks that he co-founded with Mark Pincus, his friend who went on to found the social gaming company Zynga. And then the company he founded just before starting Bullpen was called Aggregate Knowledge. And he raised over $34 million on Sand Hill Road and ultimately sold Aggregate Knowledge to Newstar. He's a co-founder and partner of Bullpen Capital. So far, they've raised approximately $95 million, and they focus on what they call post-seed stage companies that have already found product market fit who are looking to, play bigger. So Martino's got an amazing background. He's a borderline, I was going to say borderline genius. He is a genius, and I think he could probably get his way into Mensa. When he was a young man, he spent a lot of time on online gaming and learned a lot of innovations there. And today he's the holder of over a dozen patents, including social networking and big data patents. Martino and his partners also had a huge impact in our thinking around category design for our book, Play Bigger, and really just my work and my life. Paul spends his time between beautiful Philadelphia, PA, and Silicon Valley, and most importantly, he's a husband and a dad. Here's the dialogue that I was lucky enough to have with my friend, the legendary Paul Martino. So, hey, Paul, tell me something legendary.
Yeah, I got a funny story for you, Lochhead. So about a decade ago, I'm doing a company called Tribe with my buddy Mark Pincus. And he calls me up. He says, look, there's this guy coming into town from Austin, Texas. And I'm supposed to meet with him on Monday. And look, I'm going to go skiing or something. Can you go hang out with this guy on a Monday? I was like, okay, great, Mark. Thanks. I got to go meet this weird guy on Monday who's coming in from Austin. Okay, who is the dude? So, well, his name's Mike Maples, and he was my arch rival at this company called Motive when I was CEO of my last company, SupportSoft. Go meet him. I think he wants to start investing some money in Silicon Valley. He doesn't know anybody, so I figured, you could go meet him because I don't have any time to go meet him. So anyway, so it's 10 a.m. on a Monday morning. It's Mike Maples' first day in Silicon Valley trying to invest in some companies, and the first guy he meets is me. So I think what's legendary about this is obviously Mike became the first investor in Twitter, the first investor in Lyft, and a whole bunch of other companies. Sometimes when you do a favor for your boss, you might end up meeting Mike Maples.
That might be the greatest, stand-in story ever.
Yeah, so I always laugh about that. And Mike and I have been friends ever since. Mike even offered me at one point to be his partner at the fund. And it was that, quote, interview process that led me to figure out that Bullpen and investing between seed and A would be a good idea. So I owe my current job, even though it's not with Mike, to Mike. And I kind of owe that all to a chance meeting because Mark was out of town for a week. So who knew?
And have you guys done many deals together since you started Bullpen with Mike and Ann and so forth at Floodgate?
Yeah, we've done several deals. I mean, I did 10, 15 deals as an angel, and we've done 60 deals as a fund. Of those 75 deals, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them are deals with Floodgate. We've done so much stuff now, I can't even remember.
Yeah. But it is interesting that you helped him get started, and then ultimately you both end up as venture capitalists, you're former entrepreneurs turned VCs.
Absolutely right. I don't know that either of us really thought that this is what would happen. But obviously Mike came out with some money from Austin and thought he might be good at it. Turns out he was pretty good at it.
Yeah, he's pretty good, right? And it's funny. We had him on Legends and Losers, and he revealed his thoughts about the future of the economy, and essentially said almost everything we know about the economy is wrong. And then he began to tell us what he thinks is the future. And so I would argue that Mike is one of the smartest minds in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, no, Mike is a very intuitive guy too. At the end of the day, there's a couple different kinds of people who win in venture, and one of my coaches in venture was the late Bill Campbell, and he and Randy Komisar from Kleiner had this taxonomy. There's basically 3 kinds of people in the business: people pickers, product pickers, and market pickers. And Mike is one of these kind of idiot savants around markets and people, and you can't teach that. You have that or you don't have that.
Yeah. Yeah, and why don't you say a few more words about Bill Campbell? You mentioned him, so why not? Tell me what your impression of Bill is.
Yeah, I mean, Bill died last year. Real loss for all of Silicon Valley. Perhaps the greatest.
What a giant loss, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a shame. He had been sick for a while, so it wasn't a complete surprise.
How old was he again? I'm trying to remember. It didn't seem like he was old enough to me.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. He kept himself in great shape. I forget exactly how old he was. I believe he was in his late 70s when he died, but he looked much younger than he was because he kept himself in great shape. Yeah.
And when I think about it, I remember when Mike Homer died, the legendary, I guess Mike was most known as being the head of marketing for Netscape, right?
Yeah.
But he and Bill were, hand in glove, as you will know, and they own the sports bar together and stuff. And for me, I don't know how you feel, but to think that both Mike and Bill are gone, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, it's a shame. And by the way, that loss of Mike Homer really changed Bill's life, in my opinion. I mean,
how so? I mean, you knew Bill better. You knew Bill better than I did.
I mean, that really affected Bill. So you're saying that they're both gone is exactly right. But that loss really hurt Bill because Mike was a lot younger than him. When you lose somebody younger than you, it hurts different than when they're older than you. And so losing both of them, it's a shame. And they were great mentors to a tremendous number of entrepreneurs. You go look at the kinds of CEOs that Bill was the coach for. Everybody from Larry Page to Steve Jobs, and obviously it's an honor to even be on a list like that.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, the way I think about the loss of both those guys is, it's sort of like the year we had last year in music,
Right.
with David Bowie dying and Leonard Cohen dying and Prince dying and all that kind of stuff. And you go, what the fuck is going on? Like an entire generation of legendary legendary musicians is gone. And, to me, the loss of Campbell and shit, it's just, the valley's not the valley's not the valley that I grew up in anymore with both those guys gone. And Andy Grove is gone. Like, what the fuck, right? It's a different world we're living in.
Yeah.
We sound like two old fucking men talking, don't we?
Let's talk about something way more fun. Come on, Lochhead.
Yeah. So, Paul, you are one of the most interesting dudes ever. I mean, let's go back in time a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about you growing up and particularly your school and ultimately what led you to be an entrepreneur and VC. But let's go back in time and tell me about your childhood.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Actually, look, dude. I in many ways wish I was born 20 years later. I was one of those kids. I did good in school, but I hated being there every minute of it. And people be like, "Oh, this kid gets straight A's. He must love being in school." And I ended up in grad school at 20 years old because it was literally the only thing I could do. You couldn't start a company when you were 20 back then. There was no internet back then. Maybe you had a self-help book from Nolo Press, and that was about it. And so, if there was a Peter Thiel's fellow program for 18-year-olds to not go to college, that would have been what I would have done. But instead, I was, this is 1993, 1994. I'm stuck sitting here going, okay, I'm going to go to grad school because it's default. Maybe I'll meet some people to start a company with. But God, I can't wait to get out of this phony baloney school crap and get into the real world.
Now, I mean, you are a certifiable genius, right? And so how can somebody who is so incredibly, are you, Mensa smart and did like ridiculously at school, the opposite of me. And yet, what do you mean you hated school? You're a fucking genius and you got straight A's and your IQ is like, I don't know, what, 5,370 or something?
No, you're off by one. You're off by was one lower than that. But no. This is actually a very interesting question. Something my wife and I talk a lot about. So being smart obviously makes school easier, but it also can make school boring, and it can also feel like you're getting held back from what it is you want to do with the rest of your life. Like, I had no desire to be in school. I had a desire to do stuff, to contribute to society, to go make things happen. But when you're in school, all you do is sit there with books and learn stuff and talk about stuff. And I felt that school, even though I was good at playing the game of getting A's, it felt like an unnatural act to me. The natural act was getting out and doing stuff.
How fascinating, because obviously I'm the opposite, dyslexic, thrown out at 18. And, school started to get shitty for me at grade 3. Grade 4 is where it started to get bad. And so, I had a very challenging school experience. But it's interesting that you, with the mass IQ that you have, and you blew through school, straight A's mostly, right? You and I had a similar I mean, you got way further than I did, of course, but I felt in a very similar way to you. Like I wanted to get out. I couldn't sit still. I wanted to do stuff. I wanted to be creative. And so it's interesting, you and I are the flip side of the same coin, which is you did incredibly well. You could ace it. I didn't. But in both cases, we wanted to get out in the world, wanted to do stuff, be creative.
Absolutely right. And it's not a surprise that you and I have worked together and gotten along the way we have, because on this axis, we're way more similar than different. I mean, most teacher would go, well, Lochhead, Martino, you couldn't end up with two more different students. But actually, we're not. We're the same two people. We want to be out there doing cool stuff. We want to be out there, being subversive. We want to be out there doing contrarian stuff. We want to be out there saying, hey, you bought my company. I don't want a wire. I want all the money in one of those briefcases brought to the closing, right? I mean, the first time I met you, that's one of the things you said, hey, Mercury Interactive got sold. And I told them, I said, I want it all in a briefcase. They said, oh, I'm going to like this guy.
Yeah, I love that story. I'll never forget asking the HP guys to give me my goodbye present, so to speak, all my acceleration and all that stuff in a cash briefcase, and that they weren't willing to entertain the idea.
No. One of these days, I'm going to get a closing where they say yes. Yeah.
I just wanted to see it. It's like Where's it's the Big Lebowski. Where's the fucking money, Lebowski? Like, I wanted to see the cash. Like, what's the most amount of cash the average person sees? A few $100s or whatever, right? Like, I wanted to see a meaningful amount of money in like Benjamins, and I wanted to like roll around in the bed and fucking see the money.
God bless you.
They wouldn't give me the fucking money.
Every single time we sell a company, that image crosses my head. I don't care if it's my company, if it's a company we invested in. I think Lochhead said, I want it in the briefcase this time.
Give me I want cash. And I find it's funny too. It's like, you got to report to the government if you're going to take out more than 10 grand and all that stuff. We are not a culture that is welcoming of people having large amounts of cash laying around. So when did you graduate? When did you decide school was over, Paul?
Okay, so here's what happened. So I went to grad school at 20, and I did my PhD work in high performance computing at Princeton. And I put in my statement of purpose. Your statement of purpose when you apply to grad school is, I want to be a professor at Stanford and study these things. My statement of purpose basically, and I was honest. I mean, I was dead honest. I should actually pull it out sometime and post it. I
would love to see it.
Look, I am here because there's nothing else I can do, and I'm going to learn some cool stuff so I can drop out and start a company. That was my statement of purpose. And so any school that had accepted me, I was like, well, you get what you deserve.
Well, what did they say? I mean, when you said, hey, look, I'm really only here essentially biding time until I can go be an entrepreneur, what did the profs and, your academic advisors and whoever say?
So it was really interesting. Princeton at the time was a very, very anti-entrepreneurial environment. Our entering class only had 8 students in it. 6 of them were foreign born. There were literally 2 kids that whole year who did Princeton computer science. And there was a set of professors, including a couple younger professors, who really wanted the program to start being more entrepreneurial. So I think in some ways I found my subversive brethren in the university who wanted to do, and now 20 years later, they have dozens and dozens of startup companies getting formed all the time. So I was right at the tip of that spear where there was a set of young faculty that said, we need to be more entrepreneurial. We need to embrace this. And you know what? A guy who's as honest, as crazy as this Martino might be a guy we need on our campus.
I fucking love that. Back then today entrepreneurship, of course, is a lot more celebrated. Back when you and I were kids, entrepreneur equaled unemployed, right?
Right. Well,
or unemployable.
Right. So my mom says this all the time. So my brother is a neurologist, and if you talk about like kind of one of the most tried and true career paths in the world, become a doctor. So, hey, Barbara, that's my mom's name. Barbara, what do your 2 sons do? Well, my one son, he's a neurologist. What about your other son? And she finally figured out what the right answer was. She's like, oh, he's a gambler. And because you couldn't explain it any other way, like entrepreneur, poker player, what? No, yeah, my son the gambler, my son the doctor. Okay, at least you kind of understand that.
Well, no, so let's talk a little bit about gambling. I mean, I am not a gambler because for me, poker or any kind of gambling just feels like math, and math is, I would rather you take a hockey stick to my nuts than deal with math. And you can actually do long division, right?
Yeah, some evidence of that. Yeah.
and so you actually are quite a poker player.
Yeah, and there's an increasing number of us geeks who are pretty decent poker players, and blackjack players, and pie gals, my favorite spare time activity. By the way, my kids who are 6 and 8 are proficient.
Your kids are 6 and 8, Paul?
Yeah, Lochhead. My kids 6 and 8. We play poker. We play poker almost every night for 30 minutes before they go to bed. That's their bedtime story. They are proficient at least a dozen poker games at 6 and 8. How cool is that?
And so it's crazy. I mean, they're going to be pros if they want to be at this point. And I got to believe they got some of your Mensa IQ, at least a bit of it, right? And last time I checked, your gal is not exactly a moron.
Yeah, when you get a PhD from Stanford and undergrad from MIT, you're probably not dumb either, right?
Yeah, probably not. So they're going to be really smart, and they're going to be gamblers.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you love that shit, don't you? Yeah.
I mean, who needs another story at night? I mean, I need them to tell me the hand ranks in poker. I mean, that's what I'm talking about.
And what parallels do you see between poker and entrepreneurship?
So poker and entrepreneurship share one fundamental characteristic. Both things require a lucky break, and both things require you to capitalize on your lucky break. That is the key. Games are the same. If you don't get the cards, you're not going to win. But when you get the cards, what you do with them dictates if you become legendary or a loser, to use your show's name.
Thank you.
So that is why those two things are absolutely the same. And the temperament to be a good poker player is actually the same temperament you need to be a good entrepreneur. You need to capitalize on your lucky break. But if you think you can just out of whole cloth make your lucky break, then you're kind of delusional.
And isn't there something else that's interesting, which is, I guess if you play, you tell me, because I don't know shit about poker, but if you play poker over a period of time, the amount of luck you get and I get is sort of going to even out, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And so it's sort of bullshit to say, well, you just got lucky. Well, yeah, sometimes we all just get lucky, but the amount of luck, so to speak, that any one person gets is going to be the same over a period of time.
That means you got to play the game. And so the lesson in that, Lochhead, is if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you got to play the game enough times.
Yeah.
If you
and
decide
to your
you're
point,
for one day, you might not get your break. But if you decide you're going to spend 5 companies 20 years, you're going to do 10 companies 8 years, whatever it is, you're probably going to get a chance at a lucky break because you've played the game enough times.
and so isn't it the thing is you got to be smart enough to know when the fuck you were lucky and what to do when you get lucky? Is that what you think makes the difference?
So let me tell you my favorite. They have a saying in Wall Street: no one rings a bell at the bottom. Right? That's a saying in Wall Street, meaning only in hindsight do you know you're at the bottom. In the early days of Tribe, and Tribe was not a successful social network, but we were way right around playing. We were in me and Pincus and Val Simon, Chris Paul, we were swimming in the right pool. The company was not successful, but we were in the right spot. Pincus and I went and did a pitch at a fund that's no longer in existence. And we got halfway through the pitch, and this is Christmas of 2002 at the bottom of the tech bust. And the woman we were pitching said to us, "Guys, don't you know the consumer internet is over?" And Mark and I looked at each other.
How great is that? What year? Say what year that was again?
Christmas of 2002.
2002. The consumer internet is over. Yeah. Tell the Snap guys that.
Right. Mark Zuckerberg who started Facebook in 2004, right?
Right.
But the point was this. It was such a clear ringing of the bell at the bottom that you rarely get in your life. For her to have the hubris to say that the consumer internet was over because she thought it was, Mark and I walked out of there and we knew we were.
It was on, right? Because by the way, how did you tell? And I'm going to say this word on purpose. How could you tell she was a loser and she had it wrong, and that you should do a 180 from her opinion?
The certitude with which she said it. The way that she stopped the presentation because there was no point in listening to any more. That was the big tell in it. If the people with the money have that level of certitude about a future, you got to bet the other way. That's what I as a contrarian investor, that is what I look for the now 15 years that have gone by. Whenever I see someone that certain on the other side of the trade, I know I'm going to make money.
It's interesting. We have one of the greatest minds I ever met, a guy named Bix Bixon on Legends and Losers. And he said something that stopped me in my tracks, which is most of us are living inside other people's thinking.
Right.
And interestingly, we are all way better at hacking the past than hacking the future.
Absolutely.
So we see something in the present, it reminds us of shit of the past. We hack the past, we apply it to the present. In the case of a venture capitalist, then we try to project that forward and we say, well, the consumer internet's over, as opposed to actually being able to imagine the possible that you guys were trying to create and ultimately, Zuckerberg created.
Absolutely right. And it's just being a contrarian investor is actually very hard in Silicon Valley because Silicon Valley, by and large, is a herd animal. One of the companies in our portfolio is awesome, FanDuel, fantasy sports company. So
amazing company, right? Changed everything.
He pitches everybody in Silicon Valley. He gets 77 no's out of 78 pitches. What does he get? Oh, you're from Edinburgh, Scotland. Oh, there's no exits in sports. Oh, who plays fantasy, right? It's because there was no template for this company to be successful. And when there's not a template for your company to be successful, you get no's, even though your company can be successful. Because it is very, very difficult to be the one fund out of 78 to say, I'll take a bet on this idea that no one's ever made money on before. Whereas, I'll invest in Snap because, you know what, Facebook was successful.
So how do you both, if you have your entrepreneur hat on one side and your VC hat on the other, as an entrepreneur, how do you get people, whether it's investors or employees or customers or whoever it is, to buy into this vision that requires such a huge leap in sort of forward vision?
So our original limited partners in our funds were by and large me and my founders and our buddies' money. And we told them we're going to do contrarian, different things. We're going to have an alternative strategy in portfolio construction. And you guys better be down with the fact that we're going to do stuff that's different. And you know what? If an alcohol delivery company comes in, if a cannabis company comes in, if a fantasy sports company comes in, by the way, if a cosmetics company comes in, we might do all of them. And now, 7 years later, once we've demonstrated that the model is right, we have major institutional investors, big stodgy universities, et cetera, who put us in their portfolio because they actually want unbridled risk in their total portfolio. And we have now said we're good at unbridled risk. And if you want to diversify your portfolio, having some exposure to Bullpen is good for your total portfolio because we're as risky an asset as you'll take. And one of our limited partners even said to me, he says, Paul, if you start doing conventional deals, I won't give you any more money. I was like, that's what I want to hear from you.
And so should Bullpen's tagline be, if it's fucking crazy, call us? Or like
Yeah, you know what? So Chris, let me tell you the number one predictor of us giving money to a CEO. When a CEO comes into our office and he or she has a chip on his or her shoulder and is pissed off that everyone else wasn't giving them the time of day, the more mad and frustrated they are, the better the indicator that it's a deal we're going to want to do than any other thing in the deck.
So does that mean you back punk rockers, you back these pirates that want to go fucking really bring something different to the world, storm the castle, slay the dragon, save the princess, and make off with all of the kingdom?
It's yes, but it's slightly different. It's more like this. My thing is working and no one's given me credit. What the hell is wrong with the rest of the world? Just look at my numbers, look at my product, look at what's going on. But since I don't look like they want me to, I'm not from where they want me to be, I'm not in a category they're used to, they want to dismiss all my success as some lucky whatever. And so I'm pissed off at the rest of the ecosystem that I'm not getting proper hearing. Almost the Rocky Balboa type thing. When Rocky's coming up the steps, that's the person we want to back.
I don't know if it was exactly the same for me, but certainly with our book Play Bigger, for the truth for me, Paul, was for much of my professional life, I felt crazy. And I felt like that character, I feel crazier now. We talk about that. My crazy's off the chain now. But because I felt like that, what was that movie with Bruce Willis, I See Dead People?
The Sixth Sense.
The Sixth Sense, thank you. So, I felt like I saw this stuff and about categories and all the shit that's in the book. And yet the vast majority of people I talked to just had no fucking clue. And a lot of them had no fucking interest in getting a clue. And even with, our publisher at Harper is, Jack Welch's publisher and Gary Vee's publisher and all these big ding dong dudes, even with her saying, oh, you guys are writing she called it a classic. I just thought, is this thing going to come out and everybody's going to laugh or not get it? Or, you just, when you're on that fringe of something, it can really fuck with your sanity, can it?
Dude, you're so right. Do you know how hard it is to be Cassandra? Right? I mean, this is the bottom line. People think it'd be awesome to predict the future. Predicting the future well is actually kind of a curse because you see something that nobody else sees. You're by definition crazy because you can't demonstrate that it's going to be true.
That's right.
Only in hindsight are you a genius. So that actually kind of sucks.
Yeah, no, it's actually, the truth is it's much less so for me now at my age, but I mean, for the vast majority of my working life, it was kind of painful.
Right.
And
I totally agree.
Even inside companies as a CMO, I'm operating out of this, if you'll allow me, a playbook in my head, and I'm trying to share what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing, and how these patterns I'm connecting and all these things. And when people can't get it, I just think I must be, it's either me or them, right?
Right.
And so is that what you're looking for in entrepreneurs? That is that the kind of the part of that frustration, that chip on the shoulder?
Yes, that chip on the shoulder, but it's got to be directed at the right person, right? That chip on their shoulder to some extent needs to be directed at the rest of the venture ecosystem. If it's directed at a competitor, if it's directed at their mom, if it's directed at Lochhead and that crappy show podcast he wasted time listening to, no, that's not so good. Now, if it's directed at the rest of the venture ecosystem, then I know it's probably someone we like.
Because all the no's from the rest of the ecosystem, the venture world, means that your contrarian sort of thought might actually make this the perfect entrepreneur for you. Is that
exactly right? The signaling in that is actually tremendously valuable to us with the way we run our firm and how we pick our companies.
Interesting. That's so great. Now, let's go back a little bit because I want to unpack how you got to this mindset. And so you get out of school and tell us the degrees that you got out of school you ended up with.
So I got an undergraduate degree from Lehigh, and then I got a master's degree basically kind of in absentia from Princeton. So I completed all of the degree requirements from the school perspective. And so they give you a master's degree for that, even though you didn't complete your thesis.
Okay. So you're on the, I don't know, you tell me, 10-yard line, 3-yard line to get the PhD. You just didn't do it, and so they gave you the master's.
It's sort of like that. It was maybe I was more like the 30-yard line, not the 10-yard line.
All right. But you wanted to be an entrepreneur. So right. You get out of school, and what's the first thing you do, Mr. Martino?
Well, I mean, I was there finding the ideas and concepts that would get my first company going.
At school, right?
A company from my bedroom years ago in the modem days that was successful. Made a lot of money, and when I was in high school, it was great. I'd get thousands of dollars a month in game registrations in the old shareware days, if you remember them.
Of course I do.
Yeah.
I got a couple of years on you, handsome.
Yeah, right. And so, it's funny. A lot of people don't remember that anymore. The shareware license, it's, it dates you in a certain way now.
No, and actually, you tell me, but shareware predates even the phrase open source, does it not?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I thought so.
Predates it.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of the great software in the early days of the PC was quote unquote shareware.
Absolutely. So I did a shareware game company. I would make thousands of dollars a month, and my mom would sit there and go,
how are you monetizing it, given you were giving it away?
So in the modem network days, right, these networks, they were kind of like early versions of what now are social networks. And so, by the way, when I did Tribe then years later, it was kind of like coming back to the roots of what I was doing in the old modem network.
Because a game requires a group of people to come together to play, right? Thus a network?
Yep, that's right. And now on a modem network, only one person played at a time, but you'd queue up your moves for the whole day, and then it felt like a whole group of people were playing. It was actually pretty cool stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so I did that, and then I did a security company related to the work I was doing at Princeton, and Intertrust bought it, and Intertrust went public in the 1999 bubble. That's where I met my partner, Duncan Davidson. And another kind of anecdote in my life, when Victor Shear, the CEO, bought the company. Now, I'm a hardcore geek at this point. I wrote all the code. I'm in the bowels of the company. Victor buys the company, and he comes into a meeting with me, and he introduces me to this guy, Duncan Davidson. And Duncan Davidson heads business development. I'm like, why is this guy here? Victor says the following thing to me. He says, Paul, look, if we're going to consummate this acquisition and you're going to join the company, I have one condition. And I'm like, well, what's it going to be? He's like, you work for this guy. I was like, I work for the guy in business development. He said, look, you are not allowed to write a line of code when you're at Intertrust. You're a geek, but you speak in complete sentences, so you need to be in a business development group. And it was in many ways one of the luckiest breaks I ever got in my career, because I then, under Duncan's tutelage, got to learn everything about M&A, mergers, IPO, business development. I learned, forget about getting an MBA. In a year working with Duncan, I learned everything I needed to know. And so I had completely transitioned from being a hardcore geek, and I mean the hardcore, the one that they don't let out of the dark room geek, into being a front office person in a very short period of time, because Victor had the vision to say, this guy'd be good at that part of the puzzle. And what a lucky break that was for me.
Isn't it amazing? We all need people at various points in our careers and our lives to identify some talent of ours and kind of push us in the right direction, don't we?
Yeah. And I would have never thought of that. I'd be like, you hired me because I'm a technical genius on this really hard problem, and you're going to make me do what?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And were you always, I mean, it's very obvious talking to you today, you can hear it in your voice. You're very, very aggressive, very alpha, very driven. Um, that's not the picture I think a lot of people have in their head of geeks. They sort of think they're maybe more introverted because they're more analytical and so forth. Was this sort of aggressive, forward, fast talking part of your personality always present, or did it develop over time?
Yeah. So no, it always was. And it was, so I had, any kid in school, you kind of ask them, you're in sixth grade. So lochhead, what were your two activities you like to do in school in sixth grade?
The thing I like to do most, it's in sixth grade. You want to know the absolute
Yeah, I
truth?
do.
I like to play dodgeball
Right.
because I was really good at it. I was the last guy, and even though I was a big guy,
Yep.
so an easy target, I was strong as shit, and you could whip that ball at me, and I can give a shit how much it hurt to catch it. I would catch it, and when I had the ball, and it was just you and me, you were shitting your pants because if I hit you and I was good, I was going to hurt you, and I was going to hurt you and win. And so that was one of my favorite things to do around that age.
So my two things when I was in school were I would write computer programs because I was that age where you could be in sixth grade and write programs. Just, I'm just old enough that happened. And my other hobby was I was in all the school plays. Now you tell me how many computer geeks you've ever met in your life
Yeah.
that their other activity is being in the school play.
Yeah.
I had this weird DNA mix that made these the two things I like to do.
Yeah, it's funny. Shortly, I think it was seventh grade, if I remember, I was getting worse and worse and worse in school. And my mom, Jackie, God bless her, she didn't know I was dyslexic, but she could tell something was off.
Yeah.
And she found a fine arts school where 50% of the curriculum was music, art, and drama. And
Yeah.
so while science and math and all that, and geography, all that shit was shutting for me, guess what? I was the star of the fucking school play. I was in the band. I was starting bands. So all that stuff then came out just shortly thereafter. But I had to be in the right environment. The school I was in when I was playing dodgeball, there was no theater, there was no music, there was no
Right.
art. So yeah, isn't that interesting? But for you, I mean, you got this crazy brain because this analytical, very, very technical, super high IQ, and yet you've got this creative, and then also, listen, Paul, you like to be the center of attention, man. You want to get in there and mix it up. You're a fighter. You want to mix things up and make shit happen.
It is. So for better and worse, it's a highly unusual set of DNA under the covers. And so that's why this break that we got to the story on was so important, because I finally had something. By the way, Victor was a very unusual CEO of a public company. He had his quirks and then some, but he was the first person to kind of ever figure out how to leverage the weird DNA that I had. And what a relief that is. Like lochhead, for you, same thing. Somebody eventually figured out what to do with you, right?
Yes. And there were a bunch along the way. The guy that got me to Silicon Valley was a guy named John Luongo, and he was the CEO of a company called Vantiv in the early days of the CRM wars. And well, the movie didn't necessarily end that well for John and I. He sort of fired me without telling me, which really pissed me the fuck off. But in spite of that, I will always be forever grateful for him, because you're right. He saw me in a way that I didn't see myself, for sure. And then he put me in that position. He acquired my company and he said, I want you to do this marketing thing for me and go out there and build the company and build the category and all the shit. And so he put me on that trajectory. And I was 27, 28 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, and that is, acquisitions tend to go well when there's a piece of human talent that really can get used in a way that the company can accelerate its plan on. And, like you said, it didn't turn out right. I didn't stay at Intertrust all that long, but also I happened to meet Duncan, who I started Bullpen with. So, it's not all going to be perfect, but you got to make as many friends as you can.
Yeah, exactly. Now I'm curious on if you don't want to go here, that's, you tell me, but from a personal perspective, Paul, growing up with this insane amount of talent and these both sides of your brain, was there a personal cost? Was there a downside to it?
Yeah, it's personal cost and downside are too strong a statement.
Okay.
But I would end up in a spot. So if I go way back to my grade school days, I just couldn't. I was so frustrated with like the teachers and the school and the way stuff was done that eventually me and a friend of mine hatched this plan that we would leave school without a degree. So I actually went and did it. This is a funny story. Most people don't know this story. I'll tell it here though. So it's 10th grade and my friend Jeremy Fiebert, who's now a professor at Stanford, so he was no dummy either. He went to Harvard. He says to me, he says, Paul, we're smart. Why don't we get out of here early? So I looked into it, and I spent.
Are you like two guys trying to break out of Shawshank at that point?
Exactly, break out of Shawshank, right? This is what I mean. So it's not like it was like break out of Shawshank, but we felt like we didn't have the right things around us. And so I did it. I spent the time. I found a professor. Lehigh was a school 45 minutes away. I got accepted without a high school degree. Instead of going to my senior year of school, I entered as a sophomore, and then I graduated 2 years.
Wait. Slow down here. So you leave high school early.
Yep.
1 year, 2 years early?
1 year early.
1 year early, and you go straight to college as a sophomore. So in your second year of college.
That's right. So I skipped 2 years.
Yeah, but you skipped like 2 giant years, right?
Yep. And then so my classmates from high school literally graduated college 2 years later than I did. And these were the kids I went to school with the whole time. But what's so funny about this, Lochhead, is the guy who hatched the plan, Jeremy, who I give great credit to for hatching the plan, he wussed out. He didn't even apply.
So it was his plan, and you executed it, and he did the regular move.
That's it. And so he stayed an extra year. He went to Harvard, has had a great career, don't get me wrong. But it's funny, I still laugh to this day because I think he thought of it more than I did. I just had the balls to go do it.
So, well, you are, of the people in my world, I mean, I don't know very many people who I could honestly say have bigger balls than you. Where did the titanium testicles grow from? Like, what? Tell us about that.
So, Lochhead, I actually really like that question. You know where that comes from? This whole self-esteem movement in schools. Give the kids self-esteem. You know where my big balls come from? It comes from the fact that a lot of times I got asked to do something and I was good at it. And you know what? If you're good at a lot of things, you can start getting a lot of self-confidence and self-esteem because you know what? If you did the last 6 things and you were good at them, and now the 7th thing is in front of you, you're going to have some confidence. You know what? Maybe I'm going to be good at that thing too. But if you had failed miserably at the 6 things before, it's pretty tough to have big balls at that point.
So you just had this pattern recognition around, hey, you put a test in front of me, you put a problem in front of me, whatever it is, you put any challenge in front of me, I do pretty good, so fucking A, bring it.
Exactly right. And that's earned. This is my beef with some of the education system. You can't bestow that on a student. A student must earn that. An entrepreneur must earn that. You don't get to say, well, this girl's going to be wonderful. So, you don't give them the Nobel Peace Prize before the president, right? You don't do that. You're
not supposed to anyway.
Right?
I think it happened once.
Right. I wasn't trying to be political. They're just using
let's keep politics out of this. There's enough of that shit in our world today.
So I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah. No, but so what you're saying, I think, is an important thing to unpack, which is if you want confidence, you got to get in the game, you got to play, and you got to get good at shit.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden, like, oh my God, that guy's really confident. Well, no kidding.
And did you do, I know I had to, did you have to do some fake it till you make it in the beginning or you didn't feel like that you just been on this path from a young age?
In entrepreneurship, there's always fake it before you make it. But there's a difference between a bluff and a semi-bluff, and that's a poker term, right? In semi-bluffs, you've got good cards if your cards come in. A bluff is you got your ass cheeks hanging out, and if anybody looks behind the curtain, you're in deep trouble. And the good entrepreneurs are excellent semi-bluffers. They are excellent. Fake it till you make it is the right phrase. But they're not liars, nor are they really got their butt cheeks hanging out. There's a big difference between those two things.
It's interesting, Paul. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody quite put it that way because I certainly felt like I had to do a lot of fake it till you make it. At 27 or 28 years old, I'm the head of marketing of a publicly traded company and, all that stuff. And I always had a lot of swagger and all that. But to your point, there were moments where I felt like I was a fraud, but I never was. Do you know what I mean? Like I was always working so diligently, so hard to master what I was doing. I was reading, I was trying, I was learning, I was seeking out mentors, I was pushing myself. And I had confidence in myself that I would figure it out, even if I didn't know how to. And so you're right. I was like, the confidence and the results from the past allowed me to have that, I don't know, 30% bluff or whatever percent maybe it is, to know that even though I didn't know the specifics of whatever the topic was, I would fucking figure it out. Is that what you're talking about?
You know the story, so we talked about Rocky already, but the story of Rocky and the screenplay is actually one of my favorite stories of all time. So most people don't remember this. Sylvester Stallone wrote the screenplay, and he wrote it over one weekend because a guy at a party on a Friday night said, "Are you working on anything?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm working on something." And the guy at the other side of the table basically said something like, "Well, I was thinking about, it'd be cool if I could see something about a boxer." And over that weekend, he wrote the script in 48 hours. And everyone thinks he's a dumb jock. He wrote the script in 48 hours because he was faking it till he made it. Exactly what you're doing. And I wish more people remembered how smart Stallone actually is, not what a big lug he is because of his muscles.
You know, it's interesting you say that. I didn't know that story.
It's an awesome story.
It is an awesome story. So he sort of caught himself kind of puffing his chest up maybe a little more than he should have. And he thought, in order not to be a lying douchebag, I better fucking write this script.
Right.
I love that. You know, I've had that moment more times than I can count, right? Yes. The other thing I love about him, talking about, you know, titanium testicles, is the story about how when he started to shop it, people were interested because it was a great script, but they wanted some known actor to play Rocky. Right. And he said, "Fuck you. I either play Rocky or you don't get my script."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, so that story's a good one.
And then, walk us through kind of your entrepreneurial journey from exiting college to where you are today, starting Bullpen, which of course is an entrepreneurial endeavor as well.
Yeah. So I did the security company bought by Intertrust. I then started Tribe with Pincus in 2002.
So Tribe came right after the security company.
Yeah, I spent a small period of time at a startup Duncan was doing called Sky Pilot, but that was, you know, six months of my life.
Yeah, those don't really count.
Yeah, and so
what was the original vision at Tribe? I mean, you had been, because of your gaming background as a kid, you sort of you understood how deeply people wanted to network when they had to do it offline and then plug into a modem and all that with the game, which is so cool. So what was in your mind? What was in Pincus's mind when you guys were starting a social network?
So unfortunately, the main thing in Pincus's mind was wrong, even though we were in the right spot. It was Craigslist is this monster behemoth of an awesome company making tons of money with classifieds, but you don't know who's on the other side. There's this company called Friendster doing social networking with known identities. We should do Friendster meets Craigslist, socially linked classifieds. That was the concept that was behind Tribe. It was a very solid idea, but it turned out that social networking was an idea big enough all by itself that we kept trying to have this, you know, carbidingulator attached to the social network, right? And we could never get it right because the carbidingulator didn't fit. So we ended up with we ended up with a basket of doorknobs, you know?
Yeah. Isn't that funny, right? Because sometimes it's the smallest insight. You know, one or the other, and I appreciate you using all the funny language from the book. And actually, it's just the language that comes out of my fucking mouth. But you know, one of the stories I love is this guy Manoj who started 5 Hour Energy, right? Just because I'm thirsty or just because I'm tired doesn't mean I'm thirsty. And that creates, quote unquote, the energy shot category and a $2 billion company. And you're right, had he tried to add other shit to it, even if he tried to make it taste good, because of course it tastes terrible.
Right.
And so you just think you were trying to do too much.
Absolutely. And so one day we were a social network, one day we were a classifieds company. And it literally, the back and forth fight of that made it impossible to ever win.
And remind me again what year you started?
What's that?
Remind me again what year you started Tribe?
Christmas of 2002.
And when did Zuck start Facebook?
April of 2004, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, you had what we used to call first mover advantage by quite a margin.
At the time Tribe launched, there were three things that people call social networks: Friendster, LinkedIn, and Tribe. There were only three. I mean, if you can imagine those days.
Yeah. Amazing. And I'm sure this is a fun topic to talk about, but why did Facebook make it and Tribe as a footnote?
Well, this one's very easy. There was something that we didn't understand that Zuckerberg understood. And by the way, when Zuckerberg was still at Harvard, he came and hung out at the Tribe office for a couple of days because, this guy, Sean Parker, was Mark Pincus's intern at a company called Freeloader. So you talk about a funny.
Oh, fuck.
Funny
I remember Freeloader. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Funny sequence of events. So when Zuckerberg was starting the company, he hung out in the Tribe office for a couple of days. And I remember telling Mark, I'm like, I remember telling Pincus, why is this guy Zuckerberg here? Isn't he trying to do something like what we're trying to do? Anyway.
And do you think he was snooping on you?
No, it wasn't like that. Early days of the social networks, highly collaborative across all the companies.
Sure.
Very collaborative.
So you didn't think that you needed to pull a Winklevoss and try to sue him?
No. That thought would have never crossed my mind. It's just not my nature either. But what Zuckerberg understood is something we never understood until years later. The seed audience matters. He understood that by having an exclusive network first that he opened later of high-value kids at prestigious universities, he got that. Who were our seed audience? Our seed audience were all the people who were too weird to not be able to keep their profiles at Friendster. So the seed audience of Tribe were all the people weird enough to have gotten thrown off of Friendster. So okay, seed audience, people weird enough to get thrown off Friendster, or the kids at Harvard. Let's think about which one might cross over and be an international success.
So could you define seed audience for me? What is that? What do you mean by that, Mr. Martino?
In social and in socially oriented applications, there is a seed audience of people that you see and go, I am like them or I am not like them, that makes a reinforcement of the kind of people who will be on your platform. And so our group became very alternative. For example, Tribe to this day hosts one of the largest Burning Man tribes anywhere. And so, but if on the other hand, you're a suburban housewife and you want to cross over, and you're the CEO of the company, you want to cross over to her, and she comes and sees a lot of, dick pics and tattoos and nipple piercings, she's probably not going to stay on your site too long. What do you think, Chris?
I like 2 out of those 3. The dick pics I don't need to see. Those I don't need to see. But yeah, so was Tribe really then Facebook for people who grew up on the island of misfit toys?
Yes. And to this day, Tribe actually still runs as a very small property, a very niche property, but it is absolutely that group. And I'm not saying that group doesn't deserve to have a property, nor is not an interesting group to have beyond a social setting. But it is a group that will not inspire others to join them the way you aspirationally would want to join the kids who were at Harvard, right? This was very selfless. None of us understood this in the early
Nobody
days.
Aspired to be
Zuckerberg got this.
Nobody aspired to be like the people on Tribe. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
So I fucking love it. So the failure of Tribe, and particularly not just the failure of Tribe, but the failure of Tribe in the face of the I don't even know there's words to describe the success of Facebook and the importance of Facebook. What did that do for you, mentally, psychologically, intellectually? How did you deal with all that? How did you process all of that?
Yeah. So obviously anytime a startup goes south, there are days where you just want to shoot yourself when you're in the office. But you know what? We were so right about so many things, and Mark and I both knew this, that we knew that whatever we did next was probably going to be pretty cool. So Mark goes off and does Zynga. I go off and do aggregate knowledge with Chris Law. And I knew the data coming off social networks would be great. That's what aggregate knowledge was. Mark knew that the gaming experience on social networks would be great. We would have known none of that had we not started Tribe. So Tribe is one of those, in venture parlance, successful failures in that it set up the next thing. Now, you might have lost your money as an investor in that, but if you invested in us again the next time, you made a lot of money. And that's the difference. And then there are some failures in startup world too. But Tribe was one of those successful failures in that regard, that it spawned so much. I own 25 patents that are now owned by then LinkedIn and Microsoft now. And you go read those patents, and I sit there and I'm proud of that, because we figured this stuff out way before Zuckerberg was even doing this stuff. But you know what? We didn't make it to that. But I am good with that, knowing that, I didn't quite take advantage of the lucky break I had as well, and maybe next time I will.
And did you have moments, Paul, where moments of despair in any of that? I mean, a lot of people, when they suffer defeat, it's really, really hard to get off the canvas and keep fighting.
No. So about 48 hours. And one of my favorite stories, another one. So Alan Morgan was the board member from Mayfield. And eventually when we had a new CEO brought in, I did not get along with the new CEO at all. And Mark was off thinking about what to do next. And basically, Alan Morgan had to come in and fire me as the CTO because I didn't get along with the CEO. So Alan takes me out to lunch on a Friday. He basically says, look, Martino, your time's up here. I was mad for that weekend, literally for that weekend. Monday morning came around. I'm on the phone with Chris Law or whoever it was. I forget the sequence of events because I think Chris might have still been there, but someone else who had recently been fired start brainstorming the idea that becomes aggregate knowledge. I was mad for those 48 hours. Now, here's the funny part of the story. My dad, well, you got fired from your company. What did you do wrong? You must be an asshole, right? So then I tell him a story. I go, I'm starting this new company, and I'm going to go do a meeting over with a bunch of people. We're going to do a brainstorming session, and Josh Koppelman was there, and the SV Angel guy was there. The whole group was there. We did it in Alan Morgan's office, and this was a natural thing to me, right? But I told the story to my dad, and he goes, you mean the guy who fired you 3 weeks ago, you're going to go to his office to figure out your next company? What the hell is wrong with you? I'm like, no, dude, this is actually the Silicon Valley way. You win by winning. You don't win by pissing on someone else. You win by doing your next thing. And so even though he fired me 3 weeks before, I used his office to get the company off the ground because you know what? That's just the way this town works. And I don't think many people outside of Silicon Valley can possibly even understand that.
I love what you said, that you win by winning.
Right.
And, the interesting thing, the other thing I have experienced this myself in Silicon Valley. Just because you weren't right in one place for one position doesn't mean you're a fucking loser. It just means that you were in the wrong position or the wrong company, right, or the chemistry with, in this case, the CEO was wrong or whatever. It doesn't mean that you're a fucking full-time for the rest of your life loser. It just means you didn't win that one.
You got it. That's right. And then
aggregate knowledge. I mean, that's where you and I met, of course. And I love the vision. I mean, Mike Maples invested in the company, introduced you and I.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my ex-wife after Mike introduced you and I and so forth, thinking, holy fuck. I mean, this could be one of the most important companies on the internet. I mean, it was a big, big idea. It sounded exactly right to me. And yet, aggregate knowledge didn't become anywhere near what you certainly thought it was and what I thought it could be. And so, walk me through what happened there and what did you learn from that?
So you and I were fundamental in trying to outline this vision of discovery. This thing after search is discovery. When you don't know what you're looking for, how do those magic moments happen? And we did a masterful job of the marketing. And thank you for that. You and Dave Peterson did a great job of that.
And I think the reason we did was we believed it. This notion of there's search when you know what you're looking for, and then there's this magical thing that is more happenstance. But like much of our lives and many things that we bump into and end up loving, it's an accident. And so how do you create that on the internet? We called that discovery. And you had built this, of course, incredible technology, right? And so it was easy to figure out the marketing for it in the sense that I think, and I can't speak for Dave, but for myself, I fell in love with the vision. I thought you were right. And I got very fired up about trying to make that happen.
I think we were right, but the product instantiations of that magic were something none of us could ever figure out, right? Instantiating magic as a product is pretty freaking hard, Lochhead.
But if anybody could make magic out of internet software, I thought it was you.
Right. Well, and it turns out that magical equivalent moment of the first time that Google search came back with just what you were looking for, we were never able to make a product, even though we had the core tech for the matching and all of the math. The actual product experience never could match the magic of the search experience. And you know what? And I don't feel bad about this for the following reason. 12 years later, nobody still cracked this nut. If a year or two later, 10 companies figured this out, then I'd be sitting here maybe on your program crying a little bit.
So do you think at some point, maybe with machine learning and all the AI shit and all the, new shit, that the time for discovery comes?
I think eventually someone solves this problem.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's too obvious. This search without a keyword world will happen, and it still might be another decade away.
Yeah. How do you make magical serendipity happen, right? If
Yeah.
you think a lot of I remember a gal. She was a girlfriend, not my girlfriend. In early high school, I went over to her house, and her and I hung out a lot. And she was a great gal, and we shared our teen angst and fucking all that Breakfast Club bullshit. And she showed me this record. She handed it to me, and it was the Ramones' first record. And she said, I think you'll like this band,
Right.
Because I was in a band and all that stuff. And we put it on, and it blew my mind. And I literally said to her, can I take this record home? And she said, yeah, I don't listen to it much. You could have this record. And they're my favorite band, right? And that's a simple example. But you and I, whether it's in our professional life or in our, as consumers or whatever the fuck area you want to think about, that magical serendipity leads to pretty amazing things. And there's no paradigm for that on the internet today, unless it exists.
It still does not. So like I said, this is why I don't cry too hard that Aggregate Knowledge eventually pivoted and became an ad tech company, then successfully exited, but it never became the next Google because this product challenge was never met. Our thesis and our marketing were way better than the product were. And I'm actually proud of that because the marketing and positioning challenge of the company was every bit as difficult as the product one.
Yeah.
And so our language has now been used by dozens
everybody.
of companies.
Yeah. Everybody.
I mean, it is amazing. I sometimes still to this day read some copy from some new company. I'm like, wow, they ripped that off from us from 05.
Yeah, really. And the interesting thing, we talk about prosecuting the magic triangle, right? Product, company, and category. And in this case, you're building a great company. You were at the time and are today a master at raising a shit ton of money from smart people. And so you were financing the company extraordinarily. You were surrounding yourself with other younger entrepreneurs like yourself, like Claw, Chris Law. And of course, you hired a whole bunch of fucking, you hired a murderer's row of executives and leaders in the company. So if you think about company design, you were crushing it. Category design, with all due modesty, I think we did a great job on the whole discovery thing, and yet product we couldn't get there.
Yeah, we couldn't get and again, like I said, I mean that's Tribe. We were in the right pond. Somebody beat us. We didn't have the right product at Aggregate Knowledge because the product challenge was beyond anybody, right? It wasn't that Chris Law didn't do his job. It's that 12 years later and dozens of companies, nobody's figured that one out.
Nobody's done it.
But you need the whole triangle to be Google, right? You need the whole triangle.
Yeah. And the interesting thing to me about you, Paul, it's just, I love you so much for this, is there are a lot of people, maybe even myself included, who, you came this close with Tribe to being Mark Zuckerberg. And you came, you had a giant idea that was absolutely right, but turns out technically impossible at Aggregate Knowledge. There's a lot of people after that who could have taken their toys and gone home. There's a lot of people after that who when Zuckerberg becomes Time Magazine's Person of the Year, could be just going, sitting in their basement smoking pot, working their 9-to-5 bullshit job and just hating the world, right? But you decided not to do any of that after Tribe and after Aggregate Knowledge. Why is that?
Yeah, there's a funny quirk of fate. Google went public on the 18th of August, and I turned 30 that day. Literally, and if you ever read The Great Gatsby, one of the key moments is Nick Carraway turns 30. And so literally on my 30th birthday is the day Google goes public. Now, my wife knew the two founders. She was in grad school with them. She's an early employee there. And there was a part of me that day that felt that way for a day. I was like, why wasn't that me, right? I was born at the right time for that company. But that lasted like one day, Chris. And I said, okay, I got to get back to work now.
I love it. I fucking love it, And the other thing too is, does poker help? Does your appreciation of, sometimes you just need the right cards at the right moment. Does that help when that, you could have been Google, you could have been Facebook? Does that help you? Or do you not even think about it?
I know. Here's what. I am my own toughest critic. So if I'm satisfied that I played the hand right, I don't care if I didn't win the pot.
Yeah.
Because you know what? I might not be on the cover of Time, but if I did all the things right to be there, I go to bed at night right because I know I did everything I was supposed to do. And then someone will go, well, you aren't on the cover of Time. Who are you? I'll just laugh at that. I'll go, yeah, well, because I know what I did and I don't need anything else.
Yeah. Isn't that great? Because at the end of the day, right, what matters that the person who brushes our teeth in the morning and the evening is someone who respects, admires, and likes the person they see in the mirror, right?
Yeah, right.
And so, but the great thing is, from failure comes incredible success. So now you and Duncan and your other partners have built one of the most important venture capital firms in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, we spotted something way before anybody else. We used a lot of those lessons, the swim in the right pond. Pincus used this phrase, bet on the right macro. So all those lessons got us to a spot. And now 7 years in, we were so colossally right about this one that it feels good, right? I got to admit, it feels good. Like I kick back. I go,
winning is way better than losing, isn't it?
yeah. This one kicks ass, right?
And having been on the other side of one of the biggest category kings ever, Facebook, I mean, now you're a category king in your niche in venture capital, right?
That's right. And we figured out this gap between seed and A. We call it post-seed. We own the word. We own the phrase. Category design 101. Any CEO who has that chip on their shoulder, they come to us. They know they're with their like-minded people. It's been really a pleasure. And I guarantee you, those other failures are the only way you put the pieces together to make this one work. I mean, you would have never figured it out had you had not done Tribe and met Mark, had you had not worked with Mike Maples as an investor, had you not met Duncan at Intertrust. You need all those things to happen in that order for this company to be successful. And by the way, I still call my venture capital firm a company because it still, as you said, feels like an entrepreneurial endeavor.
Well, yeah, I mean, people forget that if you're going to start a venture firm, they just think about, oh, you're backing entrepreneurs, which of course you are. But the reality is when you guys start Bullpen, you're being an entrepreneur again. You're starting
Absolutely.
a venture capital firm in a world where there are a shit ton of venture capital firms and nobody needs another one. And
right.
And so it is absolutely an entrepreneurial endeavor. And as I mean, you tell me, but I mean, most GPs at venture funds go their entire career without a meaningful exit. Isn't that true?
Well, I don't know the stats on that, but there are a lot of people who hit under their weight for a long time. That is for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you read all this stuff and it makes it look like it's this game where you're just like always winning and all this sort of stuff. But the reality is, it's as fierce a business as any, and starting a venture capital firm is as hard as starting a software firm or any other kind of a company, wouldn't you say?
In some ways, it's actually harder because doing a new venture model requires you to convince very, very slower moving limited partners to invest in you. Convincing, Bill Gurley at Benchmark that your crazy idea is crazy is easier than convincing University of blah, blah, blah to back you at a new venture fund.
Yeah.
The pace is very different. And so in many ways, doing a new and disruptive venture model is much more difficult than doing a new and disruptive company because the ecosystem is not ready for new and disruptive venture concepts the way the ecosystem is ready for new and disruptive entrepreneurs to come and do companies. Very funny. And I learned this the hard way, trust me, over the last 7 years.
Well, yeah, and I mean, even the way you present yourself, the way you talk, I mean, this discussion, right? I can imagine you walking into, blah, 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 university with their big endowment where they want to invest a little bit of money in the venture world. Just your personality, your approach, the way you talk and all that stuff is like, holy fuck. I mean, you are a hurricane compared to, your average traditional, if you will, venture capitalist.
There were plenty of meetings in the early days where I could see, and I'm a pretty good reader of people with my poker skills, et cetera. There were plenty of meetings in the early days of the fund where I could literally see on the looks of the face of the other person, when will this guy please leave my office?
Yeah, he's yelling at me. He's crazy. And the other thing too is that I love about you is like you told these investors, hey, listen, we are going to invest in the craziest, illegal, pot smoking, fucking insane, non-traditional kind of businesses that you could think of. And we are not going to go out there and fund like, somebody that wants to write a general ledger application, right?
Sometimes we do some of them too, though, Lochhead. But you know what? We're going to do it all.
So let's talk a little bit, Paul, about the kinds of things you're looking at now, the kinds of companies you're involved with that you're excited about, the new categories and technologies that you think are boner-tastic.
Yes, I will. By the way, I think my battery's going to die here any minute, though. So at some point, we're going to I wasn't ready for this much of a monologue with you, but let me hit this real quick. You're going to love this as a marketing guy. We invest in the trough of disillusion. You know that Gartner hype cycle?
Yes.
So AI and VR,
explain it.
Right? AI and VR are in the upward slope. Oh my God, AI and VR. Oh, just like Bitcoin was a couple of years ago. Right? That's the upward slope of the Gartner hype cycle. That's the hype cycle. Then what happens is then people realize the market's not ready or it's really effing hard. And then you fall down that hype cert. And at the bottom of it, it's called the trough of disillusion.
Right.
We love to invest in the trough of disillusion.
When everybody's written it off. There's the future of the consumer internet is over.
Exactly. That's where we invest. So one of our great companies in our second fund is a company called Cleanify. Cleanify is a SaaS marketplace for home cleaners. And this guy's out raising when HomeJoy and Handy are literally shitting the bed. And he's out there, he's making millions of dollars and is profitable, and most people won't even take the meeting. This guy walks into our office, and he's got that, he's from Canada, actually. He's kind of like, I don't understand why people aren't taking me more seriously. And so Justin walks in there, we're like, his numbers are awesome. His business is in trough of disillusion. We invested a year ago. He's 6x'd revenues in like 9 months. He's going to
Holy fuck
money, and he'll be the winner in the category.
What's the name of the company? Cleanify?
Called Cleanify.
And so where are they based?
We love this guy. We love the story, and we love that we got the deal because everyone else was so burned having invested too early in the category in the hype cycle. So this is what we love.
Awesome. And where's Cleanify based?
He's now in San Francisco. Company's originally started in Canada, but his whole operation has moved here over the last couple of years, and he's right in San Francisco. Good
for him because as a Canadian, I've lived here for over 20 years now. I've, over the years, of course, gotten invited to help and advise and go on the boards of more Canadian tech companies than I can count. And I've never done it. And the reason I've never done it is I say to them, until you move your headquarters to the Bay Area, I'm not interested. And it's always frustrated me that Canadian entrepreneurs don't do what, for example, Israeli entrepreneurs do, right? They do R&D in Israel, and they do sales, marketing, and kind of headquarters in Silicon Valley, and that model really works. I think that's what Slack's doing, and there's some new Canadian companies that are doing well, but I'm glad to hear that your guys at Cleanify figured that out and that they're killing it.
Yeah. So we love stuff like that. So any category. So now, guess what? Now that Bitcoin's in the crapper, we'll probably look at Bitcoin deals. And 2 years from now, when everyone's burned by having invested in AR and VR too early, that's when we're going to do AR and VR. So the beauty of this is we get to look in the rear view mirror as opposed to having to predict the future. And you know what? Looking in the rear view mirror is a lot easier than predicting the future, Chris.
All right. I love it, Paul. You are amazing. Our time together went by like it was 10 minutes. And, I hope you'll come back. And
this was awesome, Lochhead. I hope you do it again.
I fucking miss you. It's been way too long since we talked, too. I fucking miss you. We should get together. It's been way too long.
Let's do it. Thank you, Chris. I'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Well, if that doesn't fire you up and inspire you and motivate you and tickle your ivories, I'm not sure what will. And such an honor to have the legendary Paul Martino on Legends and Losers. And an honor to have you with us. Thank you again for being with us on Legends and Losers. Please subscribe on iTunes. Note, this podcast is not free. It costs a subscription and a review. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/groups/legends and losers. On Twitter, @legendslosers. And you can email us. We love to hear from you. blackhole@legends.com. And in particular, if you have any funny, kooky, inspiring stories that you want us to share on an upcoming episode of Trading Legendary Stories, email them to us at blackhole@legendsandlosers.com. We would like to thank HarperCollins Instant Classic, Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Equity Directory, the invite-only network of entrepreneurs and startup talent exchanging work for equity. OneLifeFullyLived.org, dream it, plan it, live it. Doctors Without Borders, volunteers saving lives in the worst part of our world. Richard Schmidt Surf School in Santa Cruz, California. Thanks, guys. You are awesome. We had a group of our friends from GoBundance out with them recently. Our friends at Chi Power Arts Healing in Santa Cruz, California. GoBundance, the tribe of healthy, wealthy, generous men who choose to lead epic lives. And I want to thank you guys for spending some time with me at a category design Play Bigger workshop recently. Our friends at the World Wildlife Fund, Animals Are People Too. Front Row Factor, the great new book from our friend John Vroman. Millionaire Mindcast, the podcast from our dear friend Maddie A. That's it. We'd like to remind you that today's information is provided to you solely for informational purposes. Warning, all episodes contain nuts. This oddcast is the sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network. We want to remind you to be a podcast legend and introduce two people you love to a podcast you love. Do not use toasters in the bathtub. George Carlin was right. Support your local category designer. And warning, washing machines are not for cleaning pets or children. This podcast really ties the room together, and we'd like to apologize to Kylie Jenner. Sorry, Kay, we just ran out of time for you. That's it for today. Thanks so much for joining us, and be legendary, my friends.